to think about a dream. Whatever dream that is, I want you to invest in that dream. I want you to believe in that dream. I want you to dare to do that dream. And if you dare, you'll be able to do. This is your moment to be present in your dream. I love you guys. Leave it on the deck.
Hello, my name is Fiona Sweeney. I'm a recent graduate from Wagner College and my major was theater and speech, and today I'm here to give you a little lesson on Shakespeare 101. A lot of you are wondering, what do you do when you first get a new piece of Shakespeare? And I'm here to explain that today. First, I'm going to break this lesson down into 3 simple sections. The first being understanding the context of the piece of text you're working on. The second being understanding the text itself. And the third being how to perform it. As an example, today I'll be working with the text Viola's monologue from Act 2, Scene 2 of Twelfth Night. It's the classic I left no ring with her monologue. So first we'll start with understanding what's going on in Twelfth Night. I always think the most important thing to do when you first get a piece of text is to watch or read the play. I have this handy book I got at Barnes & Noble. It's, I call it my Shakespeare Bible, and it has every single one of Shakespeare's plays, so it's super easy to find, but you can also find almost all of his works for free online. Twelfth Night also is a great movie, which I watched when I started working on a piece from Twelfth Night a few years ago. Alright, so after you've watched or read Twelfth Night, we can get into the good, exciting stuff of ripping apart the scene and figuring out, why is Viola even saying this monologue in the first place? So we can take a closer look and see that Act 2, Scene 2 takes place between Viola and Malvolio on a street, and Malvolio approaches Viola and says, "You left this ring at Olivia's house. Here, take it. I'm so annoyed you made me bring it to you." And Viola's confused because she didn't leave a ring with Olivia, and so her job in the monologue is to figure out why the ring is there and decide what to do about it. So once we have that context, I would recommend making sure you know the line before the monologue really well so that you have a point to jump off of. So you can write the last line on the top of your paper, and then I always start every monologue by writing an objective. So for this monologue, perhaps my objective would be to decide what to do with the ring. And the last line that Malvolio says before is, "Come, sir, you peevishly threw it to her, and her will is, it should be so returned. If it be worth stooping for, there it lies in your eyes. If not, be it his that finds it." So it's pretty long, but I have it right here for reference. Now that you've studied the show and studied the scene, the next thing to do is to dig into the text work, which is my favorite part. The first thing I always do when I get a new Shakespeare monologue is study the iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter sounds a bit more complicated than it is. It's 10 syllables in one line, and it follows a pattern of unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, 5 times. So a good example of that is, "Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" And you can always I always clap it out in my hands or tap it on the table, and I mark it with little symbols, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, and that can help you focus on what lines are important. Another cool thing about iambic pentameter is it can help you figure out how to pronounce certain words. Certain names and words might have been pronounced differently during Shakespeare's time, and we can sometimes use pentameter as a guide of how to pronounce them in modern context. For example, Romeo. If you were like, "Romeo, Romeo, wherefore," it doesn't fit the pentameter at all. So you know to be like, "Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" So that's why it's super helpful and a good place to start with a new piece of text that you want to learn. So I'll start with the beginning of the Viola text, and we'll see how much of it fits the pentameter. a good marker of someone being in a lot of distress or being very disoriented. If there's a lot of feminine endings, which means there's an extra beat, it doesn't end on a stressed beat, or there's 11 syllables. So let's see. I left no ring with her, what means this lady? That means it has a feminine ending. And the next line is, fortune forbid my outside have not charmed her. So I can mark those two first lines as feminine endings. She made good view of me indeed so much. That one fit. That sure me thought her eyes had lost her tongue. For she did speak and starts distractedly. She loves me sure the cunning of her passion. That's feminine. Invites me in this churlish messenger. Cool. So now I have marked which of my lines here are feminine, those three, and you would obviously go through the rest of the monologue and do it like that. Okay, now that I've marked my 3 lines that have a feminine ending, this line, and this line, I'm going to go through and write which syllables are stressed and unstressed on my monologue. Once you've done your pentameter for the entire monologue, you have a good idea of which lines you might need to pay extra special attention to because of their feminine endings. And when you get to the acting portion, you can figure out what lines might be more important to stress than others. The next thing that is really important to do is to look through and make sure you understand all the words. There were a lot of different words that were popular in Shakespeare's time that might necessarily be in modern vocabulary. So I'm going to look through this first section. The first word that jumps out to me that I don't know what it means is churlish. So there's also a lot of resources for this online. If you Google Shakespeare glossary, there's lots of websites like this that are really helpful. I personally like this book a lot. It's on Amazon for like $10, but you can find some results online. So I'm going to look up the definition of churlish, and it's right here, and it's really cool because it gives you references to different times it's used in different Shakespearean shows. So I can see here that churlish means rough, rude, or brutal. Fair enough. So I'm going to kind of write on the side rough or rude. And you can go through similarly and just find all the words that kind of jump out to you as being confusing right off the bat. All right, this is arguably the most important step of studying a new monologue. Even if you know all the words and understand the iambic pentameter, it's super important to put the words in context of your own vocabulary and think about how you would say what Viola is trying to say if you were to say any of this to your friend tomorrow. So I left no ring with her. What means this lady? So maybe I would say, I didn't leave a ring there. What is this girl talking about? It's super important for the exercise that we'll be doing later and just in general to have a good context of exactly what this means to you, even if you understand all the Shakespearean words. So go through and write that for every single line in the monologue. I know it can take a lot of time, but it will always pay off in the end. All right, once you have written your modern translation for all of your lines, it's time to get on your feet and start learning it. If you get a little lost during your translation and you know all the words, but you don't know how they fit together, sometimes you can look at No Fear Shakespeare, or you can watch some performances. Just be careful that you don't get too general. Sometimes No Fear Shakespeare give a very general translation, whereas you want yours to be a lot more specific and match up line to line. Okay, so the first exercise that I always do when I have a new monologue was taught to me by my professor, the amazing Teresa McCarthy, and it's called the Shakespeare sandwich. So in the Shakespeare sandwich, you break up your monologue into thought groups. If you don't know what thought groups are, I would say the best bet is to just go by the sentence. So for example, the first sentence in this is, I left no ring with her, what means this lady? So you could use that as your first thought group. And so what you're gonna do is read the Shakespearean line, then read your modern translation, and then read your Shakespeare line again right afterwards with the same inflection that you used in your modern translation. So for example, I left no ring with her. What means this lady? I didn't leave a ring there. What is this girl talking about? I left no ring with her. What means this lady? Fortune forbid my outside have not charmed her. Oh God, I hope she doesn't have a crush on me. Fortune forbid my outside have not charmed her. So this exercise is super helpful because it's super easy when you get a new Shakespeare monologue to just put on this big fancy speech type inflections onto your text, but it really helps to make it more real to you when you go back and forth between the Shakespeare and the modern translation. So I recommend that everyone do that. The next thing that you want to do is think about which words are really important and which words you want to emphasize, the big juicy key words of all of your sentences. A tip that most people try to use is they try to avoid emphasizing pronouns when they are acting Shakespeare. That's a really easy trap to fall into. My outsides have not charmed her. She made good view of me. But that's not actually really helpful to an audience that's trying to figure out what you're saying. They're trying to learn the Shakespeare along with you. So you want to focus on the words that are often like the verb or the most like action heavy parts of the sentence. I left no ring with her. What means this lady? Fortune forbid my outside have not charmed her. And that helps people to focus on like the key actions of what you're saying and not just the pronouns. So I would go through and I usually just circle some of the words I can see are verbs or seem to be really important to what the character is trying to get across. All right, now that you have researched the play, you've read the scene, you have analyzed your text, and you've thought about how to act it by doing your Shakespeare sandwich and choosing your key words, it's time to get up and start performing it. The most important thing to do is first and foremost to memorize your monologue so that it comes out really familiar. Now, when I'm trying to learn a new monologue, I implement a little tactic that we learned in school about linking the thoughts together. So I break it up by the punctuation and I walk back and forth around in my room a lot like this. I left no ring with her. What means this lady? Fortune forbid my outsides have not charmed her. She made good view of me. Indeed. So much. Etc., etc. as you go through the monologue. I do recommend using a bigger room so that you have more places to go, but we all have to work with the space we're given in this quarantine. So. Once you have memorized your monologue, it is time to start performing it. I would recommend looking back on the key line that comes right before your monologue and refresh your objective and start like this. I am Viola and my objective is to decide what to do with the ring. I left no ring with her. What means this lady? Fortune forbid my outsides have not charmed her, etc., etc., etc. Once you are really comfortable with understanding the text and you feel like you really are understanding it and portraying it well through your acting of the monologue, the two additional things to layer on are character and setting. So you would take a look at the circumstances of the play. For example, Viola, I know that she has been dressed up as this guy for a very long time, so you would think about maybe how that would change her stance, or think about how maybe now that she is in the soliloquy and she's alone with the audience, would she go back to standing how she stood before she's been dressing up as a guy? You have to make those decisions for yourself. But that's the fun part, and where you can get really creative. Another way to get creative is to think about the setting of this monologue. So you can think about, where is the ring? Is it on the ground? Do I have to pick it up? It's also really good to have like an orientation. So like if you're referencing a place or a person, you know where they are. So say Malvolio came on, he threw the ring on the ground, and he went back off this way. So now if I'm thinking or talking about Malvolio, when I say the churlish messenger, I can go, that churlish messenger, and I have a specific place that I'm looking to, versus I might know Duke Orsino lives over here, but we know Malvolio went back to Lady Olivia. And so by kind of sitting down and charting out where you think all these people and places are, it's really helpful that you have specific places to mention in a monologue, and it makes it feel a lot more grounded and specific when you're performing it. All right, if you watched this entire video, thank you very much, and congratulations. You have learned a bit about Shakespeare, I hope. There are so many monologues and texts to study and analyze, and I hope that this video made you realize that Shakespeare isn't as stressful as people think it is, and that learning Shakespeare can be a lot of fun, and a lot of creativity can go into creating these monologues. I hope you guys are all having a great quarantine and staying artistic and creative and active, and thank you very much for watching.